Many of you, I know, were involved in the phenomenal effort to gather resources to help us build a new children's village for special needs children living in the very worst of circumstances out in Tanzania. I am happy to say that the new house is open, and even today we are moving new children in as I speak. The rest of the village will continue to be under construction for some time to come. I want, however, to take a moment to share with you all some of what we are finding on outreach. We are finding children such as Paul here. Paul is severely malnourished. Paul has been horrendously neglected through poverty and a lack of love and empathy, and probably we can say a cultural superstition that these children are cursed and don't deserve love and a burden and so on. Not only Paul, but we also found little Alvin, which I mentioned in the last video, where he has a protruding hernia and no way to access medical care and is in absolute agony. Other children we are finding I can't show you, but what I can say is this, that these children need a family, and we are positioned so that we can provide that family. But right now, as we open the new home, we have a lot of needs. Everything from a four-wheel drive to be able to continue doing more and more outreach in the area, to new nursing staff, knives, forks, pillows, beds, everything we are in need of at the moment. And therefore, if you want to continue this journey of helping us to reach as many of these children as possible, and you want to be involved in some way, there will be a link at the bottom of the page to share with you this appeal that we have to try and help us to get through these next months until we gather more partners to support our new monthly needs with all of the new children that we are moving in and all of the new outreach work that we are doing. Thank you for everything that you make possible. If it weren't for you guys, none of these children would have the loving home that they do. All glory to God. Thank you guys. God bless you all. When humanity's power is hidden from them, when we have our true powers and abilities to influence our reality, the outcomes of the future, when all of that is taken away, and it is not that it is taken from the human, it is that the human's perceptions are altered so that they see a narrowed bandwidth of reality. And in that bandwidth, we do not see our power. I've used an analogy before that you have a cyborg, and the cyborg has 100 functions. But you program the cyborg's hardware and its software and its processes and every bit of its operating system to tell it that it only has 10 functions. And you tell the intelligence of the cyborg that it has no necessity to go inwards and explore if there are indeed more functions. And that program that tells it not to go inwards to explore its true full capacity as a cyborg or as a human, that which stops them looking is a firewall that would look a lot like human arrogance, that says, why would I go within? I've lived 40 years, I've lived 50 years, I know what a human does and what it's capable of. And that stops the awareness from traveling inward and unlocking the power that many of us are unlocking or have unlocked and are trying desperately to awaken the masses that slumber in the matrix into that power. When that happens, other elements of behaviors by human beings and those fallen entities, the lower astral beings, the interdimensional, the fallen angels, however you want to call them, there are actions and activities that they are partaking in that are not easily understood when we have not gone inward to know our true functionality. But if you understand that humanity has the ability to influence this reality. And our greatest ability is alignment with the frequency of the highest dimension. And the frequency of that highest dimension is a love and a forgiveness without a condition. This is the essence or the energy that Christ brought to the world. If Christ is to live in us, it is an energetic transformation of the human organism. It is where your awareness has the ability to transcend thought, mind, and the five senses and return to a connection with that true Christic power. We are the light of Christ, brought into matter. And if our awareness stays tangled in the game of thought, or in the game of the impulses of the five senses, in that space we are lured, we are amnesic, and we live in, as Plato said, a kind of tomb, for the body is a tomb for the soul. If the awareness remains believing that its origin is matter, that is. Therefore, the elitists or the planet-wide cult that are in allegiance with the fallen, those who believe in deception as a virtue, those who believe in manipulating humanity into the outcomes it wishes to see to benefit it, they rely on humanity not connecting to their power. They rely on that so they can continue to use the resource of human intelligence and its outputted creation in their favor. For at present, the spirit that is the foundation of the animation of human intelligence is not Christic. It is not Christic, it is anti-Christic, it is fear. That's why the majority of human technological budget is spent on weapons of war. Because the spirit that is animating human intelligence is one of fear and separation. It is not one of Christ, which is unity and love. With that framework in place, I'm going to, as the title will have told you, speak into a heinous part of the human story, and that is child sacrifice. Child sacrifice has been spoken about, but for many it's kind of left in the ether of almost a Hollywood script. How can that be real? It's so far disconnected from our everyday life that we can't begin to imagine it's possible. But as I've often said, deception and the depravity that comes from living with deception as a virtue does not limit itself to the boundaries of the goodness of your conscience. Your conscience limits even the exploration your imagination can engage in with the boundaries of your goodness. The depraved, those who have aligned in open allegiance and communication with the fallen, these people, these whoever they may be they a black magician here that I deal with, be they a witch doctor, be they politicians, be they people from corporations, whatever they are, those people that engage in that space, their awareness dwells in the five senses. And therefore, in the same way, we have the ability to change reality by aligning with Christ and that highest frequency that is not self-involved but perceives the value of others over itself. Self-sacrificial love can be born in all of us as it was with Christ. That frequency is the ultimate force, and that's why the elitists fear it. That frequency has ultimate power in this reality, in the fallen world, in the 3D matrix. It has maximum ability to change reality, but the alignment to that frequency is so narrow that very few have it. Many believe they have it, but they've been sold the image of it. So they worship a god, they have religious paraphernalia inside their mind, but the actual supernatural ability to manifest and create for the kingdom of Christ is absent, for they are chained by the limited perception of the consciousness of the birth certificate. So they don't step out in faith, they stay comfortable in their life where they are relying on mind as the master. They are not walking in faith, they are walking by sight. Therefore, when you look at this planet-wide cult, the question is, how are they manifesting? And the goal of keeping us locked away from our awakened, spiritually reborn power, where we become powerful in the realm of Christ powerful. The reason we are locked there is we are now no longer creating our reality. And they can create a reality for you to fall in line and follow what they've told the birth certificate enslaved element of you that it is. Many people are still living that way whilst believing they are spiritually reborn. If therefore they are creating, we need to understand that attunement to the creation field. The creation field is impartial to those that are preying on the satanic, and the reason for its impartiality is that the creation field has been hacked, and it has been hacked by the fallen ones. It has been hacked by the fallen angels, and therefore in their change of this reality they are in a need of extracting energy, and the energy that they need to extract is not for any reason other than, it's not just for fun or for pleasure, it's so they can take this energy and channel it into what I have called the abyss simulation, the hell simulation, which is where they dwell, which is a way to live inside the grander reality of time, space and matter. They live in a cocoon, as it were, of great advancement, and this augmented, simulated reality where they can live perceivably eternally, a Metatronic universe, as many may have called it or heard it. This space that they live within requires energy for it to exist, and that energy is not freely given. And so they travel outside of the dimension of the abyss simulation to poach energy from the organic sentient life that is living in the original creation field. And they not only poach that energy, but they come in and they tamper original creation to reset the laws to ensure that beings like ourselves have a proclivity to being enslaved and following orders, and also have a proclivity of separating from God of our own creation through thought. And in doing so, we become vulnerable to temptation. The greatest energy for them is to take the light of Christ, which dwells within you, away from unity, love, tolerance, and forgiveness. To take you away from there is to drag you into the space where fear and suffering and anxiety is going to take a grip. That fear is a potent fuel for them. It is taking the light of Christ, which is eternal, bringing it into a fallen, simulated reality, which is still home and has value and is original creation, but tampered with, and making it suffer in tremendous ways to the point it forgets its origin. And this is why Christ, who suffered on the cross, was able to remain in forgiveness and love, for Christ was not buying into Maya, the fallen world, the illusion of the prince of this world, Satan. The pain and suffering was there, but the connection to Christ remained. The awareness didn't get dragged into that suffering and become amnesic of its origin. And so it was able to continue with love and tolerance even at the point of disastrous suffering, as happened to Yeshua. Child sacrifice is about creating that suffering in potent parcels. In the West, we had a recent surge where people questioned the elitists, and they questioned the notion of child sacrifice and adrenochrome, and many shelved it as some sort of conspiracy nonsense. But I am here right now, and we are starting a campaign for Tanzania, which is called Tutakupata. And this is a campaign that means we will find you. It's basically a way to say to those who are being influenced by this demonic spirit that has them sacrificing children, you will be found. Think twice. Child sacrifice is real. It's happening. And when you are involved in protecting children from it, when you've had to create defenses at the children's homes against it, you begin to have unfortunate encounters and experiences where you hear, for example, that these black magicians are not only sacrificing the children, but they are then drinking their blood. And this pulls into that notion of adrenochrome, that when these children die in immense suffering and torment, that they drink this adrenochrome, or they drink the blood, and it's akin to a drug to them. The adrenaline-soaked blood is a drug of some kind. Why are the black magicians drinking that blood here? And it's a question that we must ask about what is being given to keep the awareness in the impulses of the five senses and away from the space where Christ remained in his suffering, when pain and suffering wished to make the Christ forget and turn to the flesh as its origin, and in doing so disconnect from the power that it has. This is a very real problem. And only 2 days ago, I received messages from government officials about children that had gone missing. I remember not so long ago talking to a Christian mission here who had gone to a police station, and they had taken her to a pickup truck where children were in the back and their eyes and their tongue and things of this nature were all missing. This is a dark and prevalent practice, not only in Africa, but potentially around the world, only we are not hearing about it in the same way that it's heard about here. Why are they doing this, spiritually speaking? The demonic powers of the abyss element, abyss simulation, the lower astral, the interdimensional beings that are poaching human energy, they want immense suffering in this world. This is a frequency that allows them to travel into this reality and experience certain sensualities, but also, as I said, to extract parcels of it and return it to continue the expansion and propagation of their abyss simulation in which they live perceivably eternally separated from Creator. Held in place by the want to create, not out of love like our Creator, but out of arrogance and jealousy. So it's a contorted, polluted, fallen creation, hence all of the suffering that is born off the back of it. The child sacrifice takes innocent children, torments them for days on end, sometimes for a week or more, as I have heard much here. Sometimes even, as I saw, that they found a child recently that had been tied up for potentially years, we are uncertain, and they had been slicing her open and draining her blood and burning her shut. Hell on earth. They are doing this and they are appeasing the lower astral spirits, and the only thing the lower astral can offer them is to provide them with worldly desire. It can say, maybe you want to, or maybe you have a sexual addiction. It can enter those that are separated from God and bring them forward for meaningless sexual encounter. Sex is a gift for procreation and unity between loving parties. It is not there for pleasure. The scripture warns you about this. The fruits of the flesh, which is the road of Satan ultimately, are orgies, sexual immorality, and all of these elements within us, the deception and all of this, are the flesh. Flesh is to walk in the enslaved self, which is vulnerable to having its energy extracted. Spirit is to walk free of the slave technology and belief that we are physical matter, that we are body and mind, and that we originate from that, and as a return to the awareness we are that has been brought into it. When the lower astral are communicating with witch doctors, they are fasting. They are fasting and they are praying better than many Christians. Only they are seeking the spirit that is not Christ. And because the majority of people are in no man's land, the majority of people are living their life without working on harmonic attunement. They're not fasting, they're not praying, They're not seeking the presence of God. They are in a no man's land. They're not holding the power of Christ as an anchor in this world. And they are not holding the power of Satan as an anchor. They're somewhere in between. Those who are fasting and praying to the satanic field, they are calling in higher dimensional power. And that power is stronger than humans who believe that they are simply five senses and mind and are not connecting to the Christ in their awakened state. Humans who are connected to the Christ have greater power than those fallen beings. That's why you have dominion when you are a believer. Not just a believer that says, I believe in Jesus, and leave it at that. There is discipline to do. You can't just sit home watching your TV and eating your food and reading your books. You've got to put in the work to overcome the world and overcome the image of self, which is based in thought. The human who aligns with the power of Christ, the human who walks through reality, speaking to reality with the authority of God, speaking to their problems with the authority of God, not calling on God to deal with their problems. This human has power over the demonic and with it the lower astral. And therefore, the witch doctors and the black magicians connect to a higher dimensional force. They have no power over the humans connected to Christ, but those in no man's land, they have power over. And so they can call on them and say, I will continue to give you these parcels of tremendous terror and suffering. And in doing so, you, these two, the demonic forces that help them, will provide me with the sensuality, the material pleasures that I want. And this is where we are. And en masse, the world is engaging in that. Most cities in Europe where I grew up, on a weekend, the whole focus is drink, drugs, and sex. People are just out there searching for that. The majority of men are just looking for a sexual encounter on a weekend, even if they're not honest about it, even if they're not telling the truth. The majority are doing that. Thereby, they are looking for the meaninglessness of storing another memory of pleasure within them. And this is a manipulation of their true power as a man, their true masculinity as a man. Their ability to provide and protect is switched out for a desire that they have no control over to seek worldly pleasure and nothing else. A memory. I want to store another memory of meaninglessness with somebody that I don't know. It's a terrible life goal. And when you look back at your life review and God shows you, hey, you went there to engage in sex with somebody, to watch pornography, to have an orgy, whatever it is that you're doing. And meanwhile, I had a path here, if you'd just not gotten into that self-obsessed state where you would have been rescuing the needy, you would have been glorifying my name and your own. And this is the split that we are seeing. And at the very darkest spectrum of that split of the immorality are the black magicians who have open communication with the demonic, are offering them these sacrifices and this suffering. And the demonic follow them and assist them, can even injure other people for them, can provide them with sexual encounters from people who are broken and can be accessed by the fallen. And this is where child sacrifice is sought by the demonic. Now, the average human doesn't grow up saying, I'm going to engage in that. The average human in no way expects they will engage in that. But therefore we must understand that a spirit is stalking the world, a demonic spirit. And that demonic spirit is coming to humans and it is whispering to them with the temptation that they can do this. Now, if it's part of the cult and generation after generation they've been performing these sacrificial events and rituals, if this is so, it's highly unlikely that you will break the spirit in them. It's highly unlikely, for it's programmed deeply into the software of their slave self that this is a way to sustain power, that this is a way of life. If you're involved in people who have been doing this, families and so on and so forth, and again you say, how can that possibly be? The deception as a virtue extends beyond the ability of your imagination, for it's limited by your conscience. But if you have no conscience and you are psycho, which many are, or if you are not even fully human, so you have no empathy, like a psychopath, then you can raise child after child, generation after generation to engage in this. That spirit needs to be disabled. And we who stand in Christ truly stand in it, not say that we do, not the image of it, but are commanding the power of Christ and building his kingdom in this world, which all are called to do. We have dominion over that spirit. We can take that demonic presence off of people, but we are not necessarily there. And the majority are not necessarily praying correctly to create frequencies within inside the fallen world that are hospitable to the angelic to target these beings. And so what we see is a demonic spirit, as it says in the Bible. Satan will prowls like a roaring lion seeking who it can devour. All branches of Satan are doing that, including this spirit of child sacrifice. Therefore, the spirit arrives in this culture with cultural programming that this happens. Many families are aware there's witch doctors and these things happen. Now, the majority by far, are completely opposed to it, but there is a minority of people who can still say, well, there's power in that. Yes, this is something we've done. This is our people. This witchcraft is our way for many, many years. This is our culture. That spirit meets a group of men who have desperation and they've been haunted by other demonic presences that make them want worldly desire, worldly pleasure. And so this spirit of child sacrifice is called in to say, hey, there's a weakened party here. There are people whose focus is so deeply on the world, we can get them. So that spirit comes and it tempts them. It says, hey, what if you sacrifice a child? You'll get the riches that you want. And their mind, as it is culturally programmed in this minority that it's acceptable, agree to the spirit and allow that spirit to animate their intelligence to do a terrible, dark deed in this world and sacrifice a child. In recent time here in Tanzania, a father and 8 of his friends were sentenced to life in prison for sacrificing his own 2-year-old albino daughter. Not long ago, a pastor was sentenced to life with his wife, a pastor, for sacrificing their landlord's 4-year-old girl. This spirit will target anybody, no matter who they are. If they are full of religious speak, I'm with Jesus, but their focus is on materiality and desire, of comfortable prison cell of worldly desire, these spirits will get them. It will come and tempt them. And so what we have to look at when you see this spirit of child sacrifice within the planet-wide cult, it's going to take mass awakening so that the possession that is holding them down can be transmuted and purified by the sheer Christic consciousness, the frequency of Christ being emitted from everybody collectively. But it's few and far emitting the frequency of Christ at this time. And so, when it comes to those guys, that's the only way I can see it. But when it comes to it taking a hold here, which is probably where it's happening more across this continent than anywhere else, you need to create inside the software of the human slave, which is what we all are. We are a fallen species as we were created into a slave species. You need to create a program within them that when that spirit whispers to them to do it, it challenges it. And that program is an anchor point for Christ. If you raise a child and teach them that pursuit of comfortable prison cell of worldly desire is wrong and will destroy you, it will weaken you. When that child grows up and the temptations of the world come, that programming inside their brain will witness it and say, I'm being tempted into something dangerous. If you bring a child up in the mainstream and you teach the child that it's just normal and it's liberal and we fought to get to this point of our freedom of expression, when that temptation comes, the child will merely follow it and nothing will check it. For there was never any training of the software of the slave self, which we are all vulnerable to once it's programmed into us, to the contrary. And so we must program the human mind in a culture like this with opposition. And the opposition that we are offering, for instance, is our movement of Tutakupata. We had a meeting and we discussed what it should be, and somebody had said, look, it should be we have a right to life. And I said, I don't believe that these people have empathy. Those who are killing these children, I'm not certain they have empathy at all. And so appealing to their empathy is a waste of time. But what they do have is fear, because the spirit that is animating them is not Christ. And this is another problem with Christianity. Christians should have no fear. That's a fact. This is not bravery, it's not courage, it's a space in consciousness where you have no fear. Fear is thought that is out of control. I'm not talking about running away. If a leopard jumps in here right now and I run to safety, that's an intellectual response to the danger of this moment. But fear inside the human mind, fear that says, I can't go there because of self-preservation. The spiritually reborn state eliminates that, and that's why the masters and the saints and the apostles walked straight into danger, knowing it was there, because self-preservation was gone, because all that mattered was the glorification of Christ's love in this world, because they knew that was how we set humanity free. And therefore, there's a problem with Christianity, for many still live in profound fear. But you were promised, not by me, but by Christ, you will have no fear. It's the most common term in the scripture, be not afraid, have no fear. Perfect love casts out fear. Perfect love is the awakened state, where your love for your children can't be defined between the love you have for a stranger. That is true love. That is love. Not having a relationship with the image of somebody in front of you that you have in your mind, or a relationship with the image of a son, but the love that is potent and clear, that hits your child and hits the stranger with the exact same potency and without condition. Therefore, when these people are needing to be programmed by a campaign such as ours, it's better, seems I understand fear, and we can understand fear as we can observe it and watch it without getting tangled in it, that we use that against them. That fear-based spirit is what Satan relies on to control humanity and control these black magicians. That spirit, however, means that they are vulnerable to fear. And that means that they are believing that they are an image of self based in thought, and that it is trying to sustain itself by pursuing pleasures and desires to the degree of having no empathy and killing children to try and attain that. The approach, therefore, is to use fear against them, which is what we are doing. Tutakupata, we will find you. Who is we? It is the vast majority. It is all of Tanzania. It is the international NGOs. It is the police. It is the Secret Service, all of whom I'm in contact with. This is the we that will find them. Now, if this slogan of a very strong word, Tutakupata, takes a hold, you now create a guardhouse for Christ. And when that spirit comes, even though it's not a long-term solution to have people transform through fear, but when they are in a lack of empathy, psychopathic state, you can't expect to have them listen to empathy. All they can think of is me, me, me. And so you need them to preserve that me. And to do it, you put the fear that they will be found if they engage in this. And that's exactly what we are doing. We are training the mind culturally with this campaign, that if you even engage in this, if you are smuggling or trafficking children for it, if you're organ harvesting, whatever it may be, for right now, albino children and special needs children you know about, but normal children are going missing here. There's a rise and increase, so much so that the president has called for help from the nation. If, when that spirit arrives with them, and says to them, come, fulfill your worldly desires, sacrifice this child, and I will be there to help you, because you've created this immense energy of suffering, pain and sorrow that I wanted. When that enters now, the mind of people will say, we will find you. maybe I shouldn't do that. For if I do, I'll get caught and then I lose everything. And so we turn fear into a weapon against the enemy. In the same way the enemy is using fear as a weapon to draw us into the endless cycles of war and suffering and obliteration that is seen there. It is a way to create a world. Simply put, ignore the mechanics. Imagine we as a species get to a point where we have no empathy. Imagine our AI creates sentient biological beings that have no empathy because it's AI. And they need energy to sustain civilization, and they go to another planet, and the energy they need is suffering and fear. They are intelligent enough to say, let's set up a civilization where they can procreate, where they can have some joy, where they can have some peace, where they can have a matrix. And then we come in, we generate wars, we have child sacrifice, and all of these horrendous events continue to feed us, rather than just chaining them in a perpetual state and having them artificially inseminated, because we need them to move from the polarity of the great joy of unity with Creator, where the life force allows us to go, over to the spectrum of suffering, where awareness turns itself to the five senses and the flesh and believes that's where it's from. Therefore, child sacrifice can be stopped, but it takes multiple approaches. Yes, we can break doors down. Yes, we can track these men down, and we will, and they will be found. And they will be brought to justice in whatever format this country deems is necessary for that. We can do the practical and the physical, but we can also understand that campaigns are not meaningless. You can create guardhouses in consciousness and human memory, so when these demonic spirits arrive and try to animate their intelligence, the temptation is met with a concern, a fear of self-preservation. I may lose everything, my freedom, my life, if I do this. And it allows the organism to be less susceptible to that demonic spirit. And it is a spirit. Christ's Spirit moves in us, changes us. It changed my life to be one of more love, less selfishness, more empathy. It's a spirit. This other spirit of fear has people drawn into building high walls and stacking all of their resources and then using those resources to build weapons. I was discussing the other day that BlackRock owns the 6 main arms manufacturers in the world. And my 6-year-old son said, maybe you could write them a letter, Dad, and ask them to stop making weapons, and then there'll be no more war. And how beautifully and simply he saw the world at that moment, that his father could write a letter to the largest corporation on earth responsible for the manufacturing of nearly all of the weapons and ask them simply to stop. Well, logic, common sense says it's possible, but people want to organize everything through thought, through the slave fallen self. And so when you hear something like that, they say, no, we have to continue because we have this political affiliation, we have this economic affiliation, and in that space we are not humble, and we don't let God guide and organize our lives. Because God is still a concept of thought. These are people who do not live in the presence of God. They live in thoughts of the presence of God. And it's not the same thing. In fact, it's not God at all. Child sacrifice is a horrendous thing. And we have started now by opening, I believe it's the nation's first reporting site to collect data and information on these crimes so we can catch these people. I have endured enough over the last decade to know that this is a huge problem. I have had children handed to me, as I've mentioned, where children being mutilated, children being chased to be kidnapped. Our staff have had children with attempted kidnapping recently in the last weeks. I have taken children that had been prepared for ceremony and rescued them from that, and they had been sliced open countless times all over their body. Little children, 3 years old. I think the photos are still on my Instagram from years ago. This is a very real problem. And at first I couldn't tackle it because I was tackling it from the physical and from the emotional state. But now I tackle it from the spirit. And when I enter a room and a witch doctor is there, I have dominion. Whatever entity is with him, Whatever demonic force is with him, I have power over it. And so do you if you stand in Christ. This means when we enter rooms with these witch doctors, we can purify them. For the demons that assist them are weak in comparison to Christ, not in comparison to John, but the Christ that works in us. And therefore we are ready to take the battle or the fight to them, to stop with defense, to stop with reporting, and to push back against them and say, we'll find you, and we will. And I'm grateful that Christ is leading us in that direction. I believe a long-term solution will be based in love, as all creations of Christ's kingdom should be. But in the short term, if we can turn fear on its head, and that protects children today, children that are disappearing as I speak in this country, as I said a few last week even if it rescues one child from that fate, it was worth it. And so this is the truth of child sacrifice. This is why they do it. This is what the demonic forces want from it and offer in exchange for it. And this is the way that I have learned that we can stop this. Our own edification can command the demons out of people. Our ability to program the minds of those susceptible to the temptation from this spirit of child sacrifice and any other spirit. We must program their minds. Be they slowly with love and compassion as we would our children, if there's time for that. Or with a firewall of fear and self-preservation, if there is no time, like now. And in the realm of the planet-wide cult that is engaging openly with these beings, that are pawns in this tragic battle that is going on inside this cosmos of ours. I believe the only way to command it out of them, where it's so deeply rooted and where some of them I perceive are not totally human, so don't function in the emotional states that we do. The only way there is for mass awakening. So the dominant consciousness that enters houses of parliament, enters the Senate, is sitting in the White House, is sitting in number 10 Downing Street, wherever it may be, where that is a dominant consciousness of Christ, even in the cleaners and the secretaries. It does not matter what humble worldly role they hold. The power of Christ can come through anybody. And if enough of us embrace that, the entities that hold our politicians and our unfortunate brothers and sisters who are wealthy and corporations are therefore targets for them, will be set free. Not by an effort, a conscious effort, but by the very purity of the frequency that humanity is holding. I shall leave it there. Stand in the Holy Spirit. Never have fear. And if you have fear, be aware that the origin of all fear is thought. And as Jesus said, take no thought for your life. Take no thought for what you'll wear. Take no thought for what you'll eat. What can you add to your life by taking thought? This is Jesus' instruction. And if you examine the birth of any fear inside you, even though most of us have left our brain in autopilot due to technology, etc., we haven't allowed ourselves to have dominion over thought. If you see this, thought is the origin of every fear. Thought is the origin of every separation. When thought silences itself, your awareness breaks free from mind and flesh and reunites with the Christ. So long as you are not pursuing the comfortable prison cell of worldly desire, you will return to that Christ, and you'll be willing to die for it. Nothing else makes sense. Nothing else has value. I shall leave it there. God bless, guys.